It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and Mia Brooks was dancing. Not the careful, self-conscious kind. The real kind. The kind that only comes out when nobody is watching. Her headphones were in, her eyes were closed, and every ounce of tension from the last 16 hours was leaving her body one beat at a time. She spun. She laughed silently to herself. She threw both hands in the air like the room owed her something. She had no idea she was being watched. Hyunwoo Kim stood in the doorway. He had come down to get a report on the cyber attack his network had just survived. He expected a debrief, graphs, a composed analyst in a rolling chair. Instead, he found this. He stood completely still. His expression was unreadable at first, the way it always was. The man had not changed his face in front of another person in years. Control was not something he practiced. It was something he had become. But then Mia did a spin that went slightly wrong, overcorrected, grabbed the back of her chair to catch herself, and kept going like nothing happened. And Hyunwoo Kim, feared head of one of the most dangerous criminal networks operating across 3 continents, laughed. Not a polite sound, not a quiet exhale, a real laugh, full, uncontrollable, the kind that bends you forward and steals your breath before you even realize it's happening. He gripped the doorframe. His shoulders shook. It shocked even him. He hadn't laughed like that since before his father died. Mia turned around. She froze. One hand still raised in the air, eyes wide behind her glasses. The music still playing in her headphones, completely unaware that the moment had already ended. Her phone slid off the desk and hit the floor with a sharp crack. Hyunwoo was still laughing, slightly bent forward, one hand braced on the doorframe, the other pressed to his mouth like he was trying to stop it and failing completely. Mia had worked for this man for 8 months. She had sat across from him in briefings. She had presented threat reports under his cold, unblinking attention. She had watched him make decisions that moved millions of dollars with the same expression other men used to order coffee. She had never seen him smile, not once. And now he was laughing so hard he couldn't stand straight, because of her. She pulled her headphones out, straightened up, pushed her glasses back onto her nose and cleared her throat. "I thought I was alone," she said. He finally caught his breath, straightened up, smoothed the front of his jacket. Clearly. Silence. She picked up the tablet from the floor, checked the screen, cracked. She set it face down on the desk and pretended that hadn't happened. "The attack has been neutralized," she said, voice fully professional now. "All nodes are clean. I've already patched the entry point they used and cross-referenced the attack signature against our threat database. I'll have a full written report on your desk by... Don't stop on my account." She blinked. "Excuse me?" He nodded toward the space in front of her chair. "The dancing. Don't stop." She stared at him. "Sir? You looked like you were enjoying yourself." "I was doing no such thing." She pulled out her chair and sat down, opened a new document, started typing. Her fingers were moving but her mind was screaming. "The report will be ready by 7. I'll flag the high-priority items at the top, so... Have dinner with me." Her fingers stopped. She looked up slowly. He was watching her with that same unreadable expression, but something behind it had shifted. Something had come loose. "That's not appropriate," she said. "You're my employer." "Then I'll fix that." He said it calmly. "If you refuse, I fire you." Her eyes narrowed. "That's a threat." "It's a solution." She leaned back in her chair and looked at him for a long moment. The kind of look that took inventory. Most people couldn't hold it. He didn't even blink. "Here's what's going to happen," she said finally. "I keep my job. You get one dinner, and it stays professional." The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. Agreed. But they both knew, standing in that blue-lit room at 2 in the morning, that it was already too late for professional. "Before we continue, can I ask you a question? Where in the world are you watching from? Comment below because we'd love to know how far these stories travel, and hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories. I'll really appreciate it." "All right, thank you. Let's jump back in." 6 months before that night, Mia Brooks had been sitting in a conference room in Washington, D.C., watching a man she trusted take credit for everything she had built. His name was Derek Sloan, her colleague, her collaborator. The man she had spent 14 months working beside on the most sophisticated threat analysis framework her firm had ever developed. She had written the core architecture. She had run the simulations. She had sacrificed weekends, holidays, and 2 relationships for that project. Derek had presented it to senior leadership as his own. When she confronted him afterward, hands shaking, voice steady, because she had learned long ago that a black woman who raises her voice in a boardroom becomes the problem. He had looked at her with something almost like pity. "Mia," he said, "you're valuable here. You know that. But sometimes the face of a project matters as much as the work behind it. You should be grateful you were included at all." The company sided with him. 3 weeks later, a message arrived in her encrypted personal inbox. No sender name, no header. Just an offer. Triple her salary. Full relocation, a role she couldn't describe to anyone. Absolute confidentiality required. She accepted within the hour. She had nothing left to protect in that city. Her first day in Atlanta, she was picked up from her hotel at midnight, blindfolded, and driven for 20 minutes. When the blindfold came off, she was standing in the underground command center, the same room she would one day dance in alone. Hyun-woo Kim was already there. He didn't greet her, didn't shake her hand. He pointed at a screen where a live breach was actively unfolding across 4 of his financial networks. "Fix it," he said. No instructions, no background, no password guide or system manual. She sat down, cracked her knuckles, fixed it. When the last intrusion was severed and the networks went green, she turned around in the chair. He was standing with his arms folded, watching her with the focused, measuring look of a man deciding whether something is worth keeping. He gave her a single nod. That was it. That was her welcome. That one nod. But somehow, it meant more than every performance review she had ever received. The restaurant was on the rooftop of a building he owned. 1 table. No other guests. Floor-to-ceiling windows on every side, and the entire Atlanta skyline stretched out below them like a city-sized jewelry display. Gold and white lights scattered across the dark like something spilled. Mia arrived in a black dress she had almost changed out of 3 times. She sat across from him and told herself it was professional. A debrief. A business dinner. It lasted approximately 4 minutes before it became something else entirely. He asked her about growing up in America. She answered carefully at first, general, surface level. He listened the way he did everything, with complete, undivided attention. Like the rest of the world had been put on mute. She found herself talking about her mother's kitchen in Baltimore, about learning to code at 13 on a laptop with a cracked screen, about building something for years, pouring everything into it, and having it taken from her like it was nothing. She hadn't planned to say any of that. "I came here because I wanted to be somewhere I could just be good at what I do," she said quietly. "No labels, no politics, no one deciding what I am before I open my mouth, just the work." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I understand that." She looked at him. "Do you?" "My father died when I was 17. He said it the way people say things they have rehearsed so many times, the emotion has been sanded off. He ran the organization before me, there was no transition plan. One day he was there and then he wasn't, and everyone looked at me. He picked up his glass, set it back down. I learned quickly that feeling things was expensive. Grief slows you down. Fear makes you predictable. Love makes you a target." He paused. "So I stopped." "Stopped what?" "Feeling things. Publicly." Mia studied him across the candlelight. "And privately?" He looked at her. Something passed across his face. Not quite vulnerability, but the shadow of it. Like a window with the curtain just barely open. "That's why we're here," he said. She exhaled slowly. "Hyun-woo." "You made me laugh," he said. "In that room at 2 in the morning, you made me laugh like I haven't laughed since my father died. You made me feel—" He paused, searching for the word human. I had forgotten what that felt like. The city glittered below them. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "I want a real chance," he said. "Not employer and employee. Something real." She looked at him for a long time. "Show me who you are when you're not in control," she said finally. "Then we'll talk." He nodded once, the same nod he had given her on her first night. But this one meant something completely different. Hash building. Something. The dinner was supposed to be one time. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, Mia was deep in a system audit, headphones around her neck, 3 screens open, completely lost in the work. When the elevator doors opened behind her, she didn't turn around. She assumed it was one of the night security rotations. Then a plate appeared beside her keyboard. She looked up. Hyunwoo stood there in his shirt sleeves, jacket gone, holding a second plate for himself. He set it down, pulled the empty chair beside her, not across from her, beside her, and sat down like he did this every night. "What is this?" she asked. "Doenjang jigae." He picked up his chopsticks. "You haven't eaten since this morning." She stared at him. "How do you know when I last—" She stopped. "You know what? Never mind." She looked at the bowl. The smell alone was enough to make her realize how hungry she actually was. "Did you make this?" "Yes." "You cooked?" "I cook when I think." She picked up her spoon slowly, took one bite, closed her eyes for half a second. "This is incredible. My mother's recipe." He said it simply, without ceremony, already eating. She watched him for a moment. This man who ran a criminal empire with cold precision, sitting in a basement at 11 at night eating homemade stew beside her like they were two ordinary people sharing an ordinary evening, and felt something she didn't immediately have a name for. She looked back at her food. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then he asked about a flag she'd put on one of the system reports that morning. A minor anomaly. Something she hadn't even brought up formally yet. She told him about it. He listened the way he always listened, with the kind of complete attention that made you feel like the most important person in the room. One topic became another. Work dissolved into something else without either of them deciding it should. He told her about the first time his father brought him to a strategy meeting, 12 years old, made him sit in the corner and just watch. "Don't speak," his father had said. "Just learn what a room feels like before you open your mouth in it." He still thought about that. She told him about her mother staying up past midnight to help her debug code she barely understood, squinting at the screen with reading glasses, asking questions that were actually useful even though she'd never written a line of code in her life. "She just refused to let me sit with a problem alone," Mia said. "That was her thing. You don't sit with it alone." He was quiet for a moment after that. "She sounds remarkable," he said. "She is." Mia smiled at the screen without seeing it. "She'd have a lot of questions about you." "What kind of questions?" "The dangerous kind." She glanced at him sideways. She'd smile the whole time she was asking them. "That's how you'd know they were dangerous." He looked at her. Something in his expression had gone soft, so quietly, so briefly, that she almost missed it. "I'd answer them," he said. She held his gaze. The room was very still. He reached over, slowly without hurry, and tucked a loose braid back from her face. His fingers barely grazed her cheek, but she felt it everywhere. "Hyunwoo," she said quietly. "Yes." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have one. She just looked at him, at the proximity of him. The midnight kitchen light replaced here by blue screens and the soft hum of servers. And she didn't move away. He leaned in. He kissed her slowly. Not rushed, not testing. The kind of kiss that had been building for months and knew exactly what it was. Certain, and deep, and completely unhurried. She felt his hand come up to her jaw, gentle and steady, like she was something he'd been careful with for a long time and was finally allowing himself to hold. She kissed him back. Her hand found the front of his shirt. Neither of them breathed for a long moment. Then his phone rang. The sound cut through the room like a blade. He pulled back, looked at the screen. Something shifted in his jaw, a flicker of frustration immediately controlled, and he stood. "I have to take this." "I know," she said. He looked at her once more, one long, quiet look, then walked to the far side of the room, phone to his ear, voice dropping into that flat operational tone she recognized from meetings. Mia turned back to her screens. She wasn't seeing any of them. She pressed 2 fingers lightly to her mouth and sat very still. The servers hummed. The monitors glowed. Outside this room, somewhere in the city, the world kept moving at its usual speed. In here, everything felt like it had slowed down to something she could finally feel. She thought about the way his hand had held her jaw, unhurried, like he had decided to be careful with her, like she was worth being careful with. She thought about a man who had spent years calculating every single move, letting that go for 30 seconds in a basement command center. She exhaled slowly. Asterisk. I am in serious trouble, asterisk, she thought. Then she put her glasses back on and went back to work. Because that was what she did. But the smile on her face she did nothing about. The weeks that followed were the strangest and the best of her life. Late nights when the work wound down and it was just the two of them. Talking the way people talk when the rest of the world is asleep and the usual rules feel far away. He learned that she took her coffee with too much sugar and no cream. That she hummed without realizing it when she was deep in a problem, a low private sound that was somehow both focused and content. That she laughed loudest at things she found genuinely clever and had zero patience for pretending something was funny when it wasn't. She learned that he cooked methodically, quietly, following recipes he'd memorized from his mother at an age when most boys weren't paying attention in kitchens. That he read physical books and folded the corners of pages he wanted to return to, a habit that she found oddly tender, this powerful man leaving tiny marks in margins like breadcrumbs to thoughts that mattered. That underneath every controlled decision and composed expression was someone who had inherited an empire at 17, before grief was finished with him, and had simply never stopped carrying it. She became the place he set it down. He started smiling. Small things at first. A glance across a table, the faint lift of one corner of his mouth when she said something sharp. Then real smiles, the slow, unhurried kind that reached his eyes, rare enough to be worth something. He began asking about her life with genuine curiosity. She started noticing when he wasn't in a room. Until one morning, Mia sat down at her desk in the blue-lit room that smelled like coffee and server heat and something that had quietly become home, and understood that the life she'd run away to had become the life she couldn't imagine leaving. And the man at the center of it was the last thing she'd expected to find. Then the ground shifted. It came in fast. 3 separate intelligence sources inside 1 week, all pointing at the same thing. The Daiwa Network, a rival syndicate operating out of Chicago, had locked in an alliance with an international group spreading across the East Coast. They were organized, funded, patient, and they had a plan. James laid it out in the briefing room with his usual lack of emotion. 3 phases, clean and methodical. Phase 1, digital disruption. Hit the financial systems, create chaos. Watch the operation scramble. Phase 2, exposure. Feed structural intelligence to federal contacts and let the law do the work for them. Phase 3 was the one that made Hyunwoo go completely still, hands flat on the table, expression unreadable. They had identified Mia. They knew she was the reason their last 3 attacks had failed. They knew she was the architecture holding the entire digital operation together. And they had decided that the fastest way to bring Hyunwoo Kim down was to remove the woman who had made him unbreakable. He came to her that evening. He stood in the doorway, that doorway, the one where everything had started, and told her quietly and without hesitation that arrangements had already been made. A safe house in Savannah, clean documentation, a flight leaving at midnight. She turned around in her chair slowly. No, she said. Mia, no. She stood up. I am not going to Savannah. I am not disappearing into some safe house while you manage a threat that exists because of work I did, in a system I built, protecting an operation I chose to be part of. She took a step toward him. I'm not a problem you relocate. I'm your partner. I need you to act like that. He looked at her for a long time. Something moved through his eyes. Not surprise exactly. More like the recognition of something he should have seen sooner. She was not the person he needed to protect from his world. She was already standing in the middle of it, fully awake, choosing it with both eyes open. She was choosing him. All right, he said quietly. 2 words. But the weight they carried rearranged something between them permanently. He crossed the room. He held her face in both hands and pressed his forehead to hers. Not a kiss. Something quieter than that. Just contact. Just him. Letting her feel how much she mattered without a word. She closed her eyes. Don't make me regret this decision, he said softly. You won't, she said. He held on for one more moment. Then he straightened, let go, and walked back toward the door, already moving into strategy, already becoming the man the situation required. "I'll reconvene with James in an hour," he said without turning. "I want you in that meeting." "I'll be there in 10 minutes, she said. "I already have something." He stopped, looked back at her. She was already at her keyboard. Already pulling up the counterintelligence map she had quietly been building for the past 2 weeks, because she had seen this coming, because she always saw it coming, because this was who she was. He stood in the doorway and watched her for just a moment. Then, very quietly, he said, "What did I do before you?" She didn't look up, but she smiled. "You managed," she said. "You just didn't thrive." 3 days later, the attack came. It was the most sophisticated thing Dewa had launched. Simultaneous intrusions across 6 systems at once, a flood of decoy traffic designed to scatter her attention while the real breach moved slowly, built specifically to overwhelm one person. They had severely miscalculated which person. Mia worked like the room was on fire, chased the real intrusion back to its source, hit it with everything she had, and then locked every door in the system simultaneously and ran a full diagnostic. Green, green, green. She exhaled so hard she nearly folded over the desk. Then she heard movement. She turned around. Hyunwoo was on one knee. Mia Brooks, who had survived 17 months inside a criminal empire, who had stopped attacks that were designed to be unstoppable, who had looked this exact man in the eye and told him no, went completely, absolutely still. His expression was open in a way she had only seen a handful of times. No armor, no performance, just him. "I cannot promise you safe," he said. His voice was low and steady and unhurried. "I cannot promise you normal. I cannot tell you there won't be more nights like this, or worse ones. I cannot offer you the life you might have had somewhere else." He paused. "But I can promise you that I will never let anyone take from you what is yours. I will never stand in a room and let you be overlooked. I will spend whatever time I have making sure you know, every single day, exactly how rare you are." He looked up at her. "Marry me." The servers hummed. She looked at him. At this man who had laughed in a doorway, who had appeared with food because she hadn't eaten, who had said "all right" instead of goodbye, who had pressed his forehead to hers in the dark like she was the one thing keeping him anchored. "Yes," she said. He stood. He pulled her in by the waist and kissed her. Not careful this time, not patient, like relief, like a rival, like a man who had been holding his breath for a very long time, finally letting it go. She held on. The command center hummed around them and neither of them noticed. Hyunwoo did not strike back. Everyone expected him to. That was the calculation Daewoo had made, provoke him into movement, catch him aggressive and exposed. Instead, he went quiet for 4 days. No retaliation, no communication, nothing. Then envelopes went out. Wedding invitations, hand-delivered, embossed cardstock with both their names, sent directly to the leadership of the Daewoo network and 3 of their international partners. James stared at the copy on the table in silence for a long time. "You're inviting them," he said. "To your wedding?" "Yes." "The people who commissioned a hit on your fiancé?" "Yes, Hyunwoo." "In every code we operate under, ours and theirs, accepting a wedding invitation is a binding truce." His voice was completely calm. To move against us during that window would make them untouchable. Not one network on the East Coast would do business with a group that violated that line. They know that. James looked at the invitation again. "It buys us 6 weeks," Hyunwoo continued. 6 weeks to reinforce, to build, to gather enough that by the time the window closes, we are not the weaker position. From the corner of the room, Mia looked up from her screen. "It's already working. 3 of their allied contacts declined engagement pending the event. That was 2 hours ago." James picked up the invitation, set it down. Picked it up again. "Insane," he said flatly. "But?" Hyunwoo asked. James said nothing, but he kept the invitation. On the day of the wedding, the estate on the outskirts of Atlanta had never looked this way. Stone archways lit from below, candlelight that turned the air amber, gardenias and white orchids everywhere. Mia had picked those herself. In a rare, quiet morning 2 weeks before, when the world felt briefly like it belonged to her. Security was invisible and absolute. Every entrance mapped, every guest cleared, Mia's monitoring system running silently from a discreet setup in the East Wing. But in the main hall, it was just a wedding. Her family had come from Baltimore. Her mother was crying before she even sat down. Happy tears, the kind that had been building since the moment Mia had called her, voice carefully steady. And said, "Mama, I need to tell you something." Her younger sister kept hissing, "Stop crying," at their mother while her own mascara tracked silently down her face. Her father stood just outside the doors with her. Joseph Brooks was not a man who said much. He had spent 30 years reading people in difficult rooms, and he had learned that silence told you more than conversation. He had looked at Hyunwoo Kim for about 60 seconds when they met. Just looked at him, the way he did. And Hyunwoo had looked straight back and waited. Most people broke before Joseph did. Hyunwoo didn't. Now he took both his daughter's hands, looked at her face like he was memorizing it, and said quietly, "That man looked me in the eye and didn't flinch. I've met a lot of men in my life, baby. Not many of them can do that." He squeezed her hands. "You make sure he knows what he has." "He knows, Daddy." He nodded, blinked twice, cleared his throat. "Good." At the altar, Hyunwoo watched her come through the doors and felt something happen to him that he had no language for. He had outlasted enemies. He had built things from nothing. He had carried grief and pressure and the weight of an inherited world for so long that it had simply become the texture of being alive. Nothing had prepared him for this. When she reached him, he leaned in close and said quietly, "Just for her, you're late." She raised one eyebrow. "The ceremony hasn't started." "I've been waiting for you for 30 years. She laughed, bright and startled and completely real. The sound broke through every last bit of ceremony in the room, and her mother, already crying, made a sound like she might not recover. Somewhere in the back rows, seated in careful suits with careful expressions, the Daiwa representatives watched and did nothing. His vows were short and absolute. "I spent most of my life making sure no one could reach me," he said. "You reached me anyway. I cannot explain what that means. I only know that I will spend my life making sure you never have to wonder whether you matter. To me, you are everything I did not know I was missing." She held it together through hers. Barely. When the rings were on and the room erupted and her mother finally stopped trying to control her face, Hyunwoo leaned down to her ear. "Still professional?" he murmured. She laughed again, softer this time. "Just for him." "Not even slightly," she said. 1 week later, Daewoo sent a representative. Not to threaten, to negotiate. They had done the arithmetic. 3 failed attacks. An opponent who had turned a wedding into a diplomatic instrument. And a digital architecture built by a woman their best people had tried to dismantle and couldn't touch. The math did not favor continued conflict. The meeting was held in a private room in one of Hyunwoo's legitimate properties downtown. Clean table, 4 chairs, no weapons visible, which meant weapons were everywhere. Mia sat beside Hyunwoo, not as staff, not as a technical resource, as a principal. Midway through the negotiation, the Daiwa representative, a thin, careful man who smiled too precisely, made a remark about the reliability of her systems, an edge in it. The kind of comment designed to plant doubt, to suggest fragility, to see if it moved anyone. Mia opened her laptop and turned the screen toward him. On it was a complete map of the Daewoo Network's own digital infrastructure, communication channels, financial routing, personnel movement patterns, built quietly and precisely over the past 3 months. "Anytime you'd like a copy," she said pleasantly. "I know where to send it." The man went very still. The agreement was signed before the hour was out. Walking back to the car afterward, Hyunwoo glanced at her sideways. "You've had that for 3 months. 2.5. And you didn't tell me." "I was waiting for the right moment." She looked up at him. Was that the right moment? He stopped walking, looked at her. Then he laughed. Not the boardroom-controlled exhale. The real one, the one she had first heard in a doorway at 2 in the morning and never forgotten. She grinned. He shook his head slowly, took her hand, kept walking. Years later. The command center looked mostly the same. The screens were newer, the processors faster. There was a second chair now, permanently beside the first, because some nights they worked side by side the way they had always been meant to, shoulders occasionally touching in the blue light. But today, it was quiet down there. Mia was upstairs when she heard the small feet, that rapid, deliberate patter that meant her 4-year-old was carrying important news at full speed. The door banged open and her son stood in the frame, slightly breathless, with his father's eyes and her exact expression when something required urgent reporting. Oma. He was very serious about this. Appa is dancing. She put down what she was holding. She followed him down the hall and stopped in the doorway of the living room. Hyunwoo Kim was dancing. Badly. With extraordinary commitment. A full beat behind the music, arms making choices that had no technical basis whatsoever, completely unbothered by any of it. Their son ran straight at him and grabbed his hand and joined in, the fearless, fully committed dancing of a child who has never once considered whether he looks ridiculous. Hyunwoo looked up. He saw her in the doorway. He did not stop. He just held out his other hand. She crossed the room. She took it. And the three of them moved together in the afternoon light pouring through the windows, badly, joyfully, without a single thought for how it looked, in a home built from code and courage and one unguarded laugh in the dark. He was laughing now, the same laugh she had heard the very first night, full and uncontrollable and completely real. But this time it wasn't because she had surprised him. It was because he had finally, completely, run out of reasons to hold back. Thank you for watching till the end. If this story touched you, inspired you, or took you on a journey, don't leave without hitting the like button. Subscribe if you haven't and switch your notifications on. You don't want to miss what I got coming up. Make sure to drop in the comments section where in the world you're watching from. We're building a global community of story lovers here, and your voice is part of it. See you in the next one. Have a great day.